Hello, everyone, and welcome to episode 1 of the Beantown Phoenix. I'm Archer Gaming, and today we are going to go through episode 1. We're going to meet the team, figure out what our direction is, what are the strengths and weaknesses, and how are we going to do this thing. So let's go ahead and get started. I am going to start with the meet the team. So, as you can see, we talked about him in episode 0, but Rafael Devers, he's a very, very good hitter. Fly ball pull hitter means that he's going to get to more of his power than his ratings would even suggest, which is great. Also, I'm on OSA ratings because I started with an empty staff, so we'll talk about that in a minute later. But obviously, he is not the greatest third baseman. At 27, that's not great. You'd want to see a bit more from him. So possible that he turns into a first baseman long term, which is not ideal. But we'll deal with it as we can. Tristan Casas is also a first baseman for sure, even more so than Rafael Devers. Really, really good player, a lot of power, a lot of eye. Again, fly ball pull hitter. This guy should rake. But at the same time, we have to acknowledge that he's a first baseman, so it's not like the most helpful in the defensive spectrum. We have some nice prospects down here. OSA is really high on them. My scout before he left was not. I think in real life, Roman Anthony is a really interesting prospect. You guys should check out Prospects Live take on him. I think that they are absolutely spot on. But he could be a nice piece for us. His defensive ratings are not ideal, but hey, it is what it is. Um, Marcelo Mayer, I think the best thing about him is that he can play shortstop. So do I wish that maybe he had a little bit more power or could avoid Ks a little bit more? Yeah, probably so, but we're not going to be too harsh about it. These are top prospects, and Kyle Teal. Again, same sort of thing with Roman Anthony. My scout didn't like him as much as OSA does right now. But the thing that we do know is that he's going to make a lot of contact and that he'll probably get on base. Unfortunately, even though they're going to say that he's going to be a slightly above average catcher, if you're not familiar, this is a 20 to 80 scale. So 50 is like average, 55 is like just a little bit above. But it's mostly coming from his blocking and his arm, and in my opinion, and in a lot of people's opinions, that's kind of the least important. You really want framing, right? So that your pitchers can steal strikes and they can look a little bit better than maybe they actually are. So whether Kyle Teal is our catcher of the future, I would be skeptical. And then I left Wilyer Abreu for last, just because I think he's a really interesting prospect in real life. Um, I don't think he's going to be this good. I could see him being like sort of what he was in Portland in Double A in 2022, like a high OBP, middling slug kind of guy who puts up like a 750 to 780 OPS, plays okay defense, that sort of thing. Um, who I would have put on along with that 3 is this man, Jaron Duran. Now, the thing about Jaron Duran is that he's the same age as Rafael Devers, and he has limited major league experience. But he had a really good year last year, and I think he can probably play center, but I would prefer to place him in right field. The main challenge is going to be making sure that some of these guys don't age into their decline phases before we get a chance to use them. So the lineup is not a disaster. It's not as strong as I feel like it could be, especially competing in the hellish division that is the AL East, right? I mean, the Orioles are going to be incredible. The Yankees are always going to be up there. The Rays are still good in this game, and the Blue Jays are usually good for 2 or 3 years before they stop spending. Sorry, Jays fans, that probably hit a little too close to home. Anyway, let's move on to pitching. So Brandon Abreu, again, same sort of deal as we've talked about. OSA likes him a bit more than my scout did, or the previous regime scout did before he left. I love that he's extreme ground ball. That's going to help him look a little bit better than his otherwise ratings would suggest. I wish he had a standout pitch. I think there's clay to work with here, especially with the new feature this year, the development lab. I'm excited to try that. I'm not so sure though that he's like the ace of the future. He really reads as more of like a solid number three to me, maybe a number four if it doesn't come together. And then you can see our next three best pitchers are relievers in their 30s. That's not good. So that's a major thing that we're going to have to look to fix. Kenley Jansen is obviously really good, but he's also 36. Brennan Bernardino, he's good, but he's 32. Chris Martin is honestly not as good as I think his ratings make him seem, and he's 37, so he's probably out of here. We do have some young-ish pitching, right? Like Garrett Whitlock is 27, Tanner Houck 27, Cutter Crawford 27. Nick Pivetta in real life, I think, is a little bit better than this, but according to the game, this is a pretty average to bad rotation. So pitching is something that really needs addressing, and the problem is, of course, we've got a lot of salary on the books, right? 18 million for Masataka Yoshida, 22 million for Trevor Story, 27 million for Rafael Devers. That's a lot of money committed, and 16 million to Kenley Jansen, which, unlikely to stay if you've seen my previous videos, but we can at least talk about it. So let's go to front office and look at salaries so you can get that idea of what I was talking about. Thankfully, a lot of stuff does come off the books. So that is one big positive. But the problem is that our offense needs a little bit of help and our pitching needs a lot of help. And so spending our way to get there is going to be tough. And developing our way to get there, we're going to end up with guys in their mid to late 30s who are probably not aging super well and are taking up a ton of payroll. So it's going to be a bit of a challenge, but that's what we're in for. That is what we're in for. Um, let's go next to our organization. We'll just take a quick look at our minor leagues. One guy that we didn't talk about a lot is Miguel Bleis. In real life, I love this man. He features prominently on the Prospects Live list recently, I think, more so than a lot of other publications. He's really good. I think he'll stick in center in real life. In this game, remains to be seen, but I think he has a really exciting athletic profile. Will he develop in the game as much as I think he will in real life? We'll see. We'll see. But there are prospects. The problem is when I change it from all batters to all players, you'll notice that almost no one new showed up. The highest ranked guy was Hunter Dobbins, which, yeah, that's not what you want from your top pitching prospect. Um, I think we can do a little bit better than that. So I think there's going to be a bit of an overhaul. I think that we're going to definitely have to uh, you know, take our shot on which of these guys are we going to bet on, right? Is Duran part of the project long term, or is he an asset? Abreu the same way, Rafael the same way. All of these guys, we're going to have to decide whether they're going to be part of the next World Series team or whether we're going to ship them out to find somebody who will. Um, I think that's going to be really honestly the main challenge of the series. One other thing to note, I have bumped up our development budget significantly. In previous years' games, I'm not sure it's done a lot. It seems to do more in this game, especially with the focus on development and the development lab. This is an off-season thing, but I'm very excited to try and use this to our advantage. It should be a lot of fun. Um, as for right now, I am going to head on over to staff roles, and you can see that everything is vacant. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go here, and I think this is a good thing to see, especially if you've never played OOTP. And, maybe even if you have. For my assistant GM, I basically just want somebody who goes with my theory of good teams, right? Like, I don't really care that much, other than I want to make sure that he doesn't dislike people who are personable and that he is personable. And I'm going to keep that basically for the entire team. So we're going to try to get people who are personable and other people who work well with people who are personable, because staff cohesion can really, really sink a team way more than you might think. So this guy looks pretty good, Matt Klentak. I know that that's a real life person, but I'm going to ignore whatever his real life proclivities might have been. In this one, he's heavily favor OBP. He favors offense, power. He's neutral on pitching and hitting, and he's neutral on veterans and prospects. That sounds like a good guy for me for the Boston Red Sox. So we're going to go ahead and submit an offer for him. Now, for a manager, I'm really looking mainly for one thing, and that is good relationships with my players. Now, you can see there are a lot of guys who would have good relationships with our players. So I'm just going to actually sort by that and find someone who is a little younger. So I'm going to come in here, I'm going to add a little filter on, and we are going to find in coach ratings, I think it is, coach tendencies. Okay. I OTP, if you're listening, I have hated that screen for so long. Just give me one list. Let me search the list. You know that I want to. All right. So now we're filtered by good, and I want to see somebody kind of young, and I want to make sure that their management style isn't crazy, right? So here is Jeremy Rodriguez. He's 34, personable, normal, easygoing. Those are his positives and negatives. He's sabermetric. He'll have a good relationship with the players. I think that I like what I see with him. He's going to be aggressive on the base pass. We have a fairly young outfield that could stand to do that. I think he's going to be our guy for right now. Ironically, though, your manager, not really your most important coach. I would say that the most important coaches are your pitching coach and your hitting coach, because these coaches make a huge, huge impact on the development of the entire organization. So we're going to be looking for a great pitching coach and then also a great hitting coach. Unfortunately, we don't have anybody here who I love the look of. It looks like Dave Righetti is probably our best bet. But I think I'm going to go with Anderson Polanco. He's a bit younger, so he has a bit more room to grow. And you'd hope that he kind of grows into maybe better attributes than that. We'll see. All right, let's sort by hitting. And Joey DeMonte seems like the guy. Legendary teaching hitting, outstanding development, good mechanics or excellent mechanics, and handles aging good. And I don't really need a coach who's going to handle aging, I hope, until our stars are really aging. So we'll see how that goes. I'm going to go back for the bench coach now. This guy is, as far as I can tell, he makes almost no difference other than just you can see that sometimes they take over roles as like teaching infield or teaching outfield. I'm just going to go with this sabermetric 37-year-old. I can't say that it's going to make a difference, but this is going to make a difference, our scouting director. And ideally, we're looking at somebody who can really thrive in the international market, because I think that's where we're going to really have to get a lot of our guys. So, Drew Toussaint, I'm assuming that's how you say that, probably. He does favor ability. I prefer neutral, but um, I think that that is probably the best way to go, because if we think about this, right, our scouting in the majors, I don't think is going to matter a ton. We can look at their stats, we have an understanding about them. He's excellent in it anyway. Our scouting in the minors is going to be fairly important. He's outstanding at it. Great. As far as amateurs and international go, international is where we're going to have to make our bank, because we're not going to have high picks more than likely, or at least I hope we aren't. And so that's where we're going to have to make hay. So, with all that said, Drew Toussaint, welcome to the team. And one last one that I'm going to show, and then I'll just do the first base and uh, otherwise the first base and third base off camera. Here we go. Okay, so what am I looking for in a trainer? I'm looking for someone who prevents arm injuries. That's basically it. It's good if they're better at other things too. So like Brian Chicklow is a good example of this. Sometimes you'll get somebody who's amazing at one thing, but you don't want like a ton of injuries that are just sort of random cropping up. You want to be able to rehab your arms as well. So even though Sue Falzone might look a little bit worse in the preventing arms, and she probably is just a little bit, I think she's the better one because she's a bit more balanced overall. So That's what we're going to go with. Okay, I'm going to talk real quick about what I look for in a first base coach and a third base coach. But if I'm honest with you, again, I don't think they're super important and they're really straightforward. So I'm just going to search for the ones that I like the best and who will take the least amount of money. But basically, I tend to want one guy who can teach infield, catching, and outfield. And then I want another guy who's really good at the running game. And theoretically, the first base coach I like to be, for example, Dave Bialis. That's the guy I like to have the ability to teach catching, outfield, infield, all that sort of stuff. And then my third base coach, I like to be really good at teaching running and handling the running game because that's where a lot of the important decisions get made, right? That's when you make the decision to round into home. That's a big one. So, like I said, we're going to go and take a look for who's going to accept the least amount of money because we got to start penny pinching somewhere. And then I will be back in just a moment. All right, so I have simmed a few days ahead of time, and now you can see I have a full staff. Clintac, Jeremy Rodriguez is our manager, Chris Swauger, and then we have Anderson Polanco and Joey DeMont pitching, hitting, Dave Bialis, first base, Nick Jackson, third base, Drew Toussaint, scouting director, and our team trainer, Sue Falzone. And one thing that's important to note, we only have two people who work well with Personable, bench coach and pitching coach, but we don't have anyone who works poorly. And I think that the main thing is avoiding struggles with, because works well with is great, but if you're winning, the staff cohesion is going to get pushed. Only thing that will prevent that is struggles with. So I think this is going to be a really nice team. Hopefully, they help us get to where we're trying to go. And with that said, let's go ahead and just head back to this first screen. Um, Two other things I want to talk about before we end this first episode. One, we have a couple of imbalances. So, one thing is we have no lefty starters. We did have a lefty starter until he was traded to the Braves. So, not that I would necessarily rather have him, but I would love to have at least one lefty starter to break up the righties. Maybe two would be ideal. And then we have a similar issue with our hitting. It's a ton of lefties. And if we look at our team, the park we have, right, in Fenway, yes, a lot of things do benefit lefties, but actually lefties get kind of screwed on homers as compared to right-handed batters. And I think that makes a little bit of sense intuitively if you've ever seen Fenway or been to Fenway, right? It's got that big green monster up on the left. But I do think that we should have a lot of left-handed batters because it just helps just that little bit, right, as compared to right-handed batters. But I definitely don't think that this is the way to go, where you have two righties in your entire starting lineup. I think that just makes it really easy to stack your rotation with lefties. And if we look at somebody like Jaron Duran, he's just much worse against lefties than against righties. And I would wager, actually, I've looked through it, Willie Abreu, Rafael Devers, Tristan Casas, Masataka Yoshido, and Manuel Valdez, Reese McGuire, all of them worse against lefties. And when you have that many lefties in your lineup, you can imagine that they're going to throw lefties at us. So um, just something to keep an eye on both sides. We kind of want to even that out if at all possible. And then the next thing to talk about is our plan. So we are pretty close to the start of the season. If we look at free agents, we do still have, let me look at all players instead of just batters. What is my custom filter? Please get rid of that. So we do still have Brandon Belt on the market and Snell on the market. I did say I wanted a lefty. I'm not sure this is the lefty I want. In real life, I think he's very good. I think in OOTP, command issues tend to just kill you. We did a test once where we had a guy with 80 stuff up against a guy with 80 command or control. The 80 control guy won like every simulation. So I do tend to think that, I mean, everything is important, right? And maybe some things have changed since that version of the game, but I'm not sure Snell's the guy. And with that said, I don't really want an aging Brandon Belt who's also a lefty on my team. So I think at the end of the day, we're probably not looking at the free agent market. So if we're going to try to improve our team, it's going to be trades. Now, what kind of trades could we do? Well, a couple of things. We could trade some of our old relievers. You're not going to get a lot back for Kenley Jansen or any of these guys, but you could do it. We could trade some of these older guys that are not on big contracts, Jaron Duran, Wilyer Abreu, that sort of thing, Ceddanne Rafaela. At the end of the day, though, that feels a little bit too soon. So I think, as with most series, I don't know that we're going to do a ton to the team. We may make a small trade here or there, but I think we're just going to try and see what is our level. How good is this team? It doesn't look great to me. This looks like probably like a 75 win team, in my estimation. God, that's going to come back to haunt me. But that's what it looks like to me. So I want to make sure that we have an understanding of, at the deadline, are we going to be buyers? Are we going to be sellers? I think at the deadline, you tend to get better prices anyway, right? You trade Jaron Duran now, you might get something good. You trade Jaron Duran at the deadline, I think you might get a really good package as compared to now. So I think that's where we're going to leave it for this episode, but that's the path forward. We're going to stay the course. We're going to make sure that we know what this team is about, know who the good ones are to keep, know who we might want to ship out. The only thing we'll probably explore is shopping Kenley Jansen, because if we take a look at what people are willing to offer, right off the bat, no one's willing to offer anything. So um, we'll explore different permutations with Kenley Jansen and retaining his salary and all those sorts of things. But yeah, there's not a ton to work with here until we decide exactly what direction we're going. Are we going to trade some of our prospects to get better, or are we going to make that big move to start a reload? So that's where we're going to end this episode. I will see you guys back on the next episode. I don't have a schedule with this. I am just putting together these as I go, just having fun with it. I'm on AirPods and a laptop. So this is just a fun little thing that I wanted to get back into, and I hope that you guys enjoy sharing it with me as well. So up until next time, peace.